Hello class. Today we're going to talk about addition and subtraction of integers. So let's take a look at what integers are. Okay. Integers are a set of numbers. Okay, and we've got a couple of sets of numbers that are ahead of them. The natural numbers, which are what we call counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Then we've got the set of whole numbers, which are all the counting numbers plus 0. And then we move into what we call the integers. And the integers are the set of whole numbers and their opposites. Okay, so whole numbers, as we just said, are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, all the way out to positive infinity. Well, the integers are going to be that set plus all the negative numbers that are going the other direction. Okay, so as the numbers move to the right on a number line, they're always increasing. As the numbers move to the left, they're always decreasing all the way into the negatives. And that's going to be our set of integers, the set of whole numbers and their opposites. Well, today what I'd like for us to do is we're going to eventually get to adding and subtracting. But before we do that, let's talk about how integers are represented in the real world. So I'd like for us to look at how could I write integers to represent situations. So here we have 3 situations that I'd like for us to write integers with. So the first one says 7 meters below sea level. Well, below is a word that means negative. So 7 meters below would be negative 7 meters. And please make sure you always put a label if a label is needed. Right. B, a gain of 5 yards. Well, gain is a word that means add or means plus. So a gain of 5 yards would be positive 5 yards. In the positive, we don't have to put a plus sign for a positive. A loss of $3 would be negative $3. And the dollar sign always goes in the front. Okay, so we can write situations represented by an integer. Well, let's talk about adding and subtracting because that's the main thing that we're dealing with today. So the first thing I'd like to look at is how do I model subtraction problems? Okay, so let's take this first problem right here of 5 plus 3. Well, what this says is, and we now have to not only think about just 5 plus 3, but what kind of 5 and what kind of 3. Okay, this is a positive 5 and a positive 3. So that means that we've got 5 positives and 3 more positives. The add in the middle says we're just going to shove these together, and we end up with a positive 8 as our answer. Okay. Well, this also works if we have negatives. So let's now try negative 3 and negative 4. Well, this one says I've got 3 negatives. I've got 4 negatives. We put those together and we end up with 7 negatives total. Right? Now, the only time we have issues with building the models and have trouble with that is if we have a positive and a negative. Okay, so if I were to take this question here and it says I've got 5 negatives, 7 positives, well, we have this unique situation here where we have a positive and a negative. Well, a positive and a negative is equivalent to 0. It's what we call a 0 pair. So if this first set is a 0, we could actually mark them out. Well, that means this second set would be 0, and this one, and this one, and this one, they would all be 0. Right? So really, in essence, all we have left are these 2 positives out here, which gives us an answer of positive 2. So we find that if our signs are different, we're going to be taking out all of these zeros, which means what do I do with my numbers? I subtract them. I do take away. So we take the bigger looking number, or the number with the largest absolute value, subtract the smaller one from it, and we find out what our answer is. Okay, so we've got one last one down here. What if I had more than 2 numbers? Does it work the same way? Well, here I've got 4 negatives. I've got 6 positives. And I've got 3 more negatives. Well, if we were to pair everything up into 0 pairs, we find out all of this right here is nothing but 0. So what do we have left? We have this one negative left to make negative 1. And that's how we add integers together. So we have a rule basically that we use for this, is that we find out that anytime our signs are alike, whether it be a positive and a positive or a negative and a negative, we just add our numbers and keep the sign of the problem. So positive and positive make more positive, negative and negative make more negatives. Now, if our signs are different, what we modeled is that we're going to take away all those zeros. So that basically means that we're going to subtract our numbers and take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value, or the number farthest from 0. So here we did 6 take away 4 to get 2, and the 6 has got more. The negative 9 take away 5, it gives us a 4, and the negative has more, so it's a negative 4. So if the signs are alike, you add your numbers and keep the sign of the problem. If your signs are different, you subtract your numbers and take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. Now, what if we have subtraction? Subtraction is another unique situation. So when we look at this first one, 7 minus 3, that means I have 7 positives and it says I need to take away 3 of these. Okay, so if I were to take away 3 of these and throw them away, we would end up with an answer of 4, and it's a positive 4. It works the same if we have negatives. In this next one, I've got 6 negatives. And it says that I need to take away 3 of them. So if I take away 3 of them here and throw them away, I end up with a negative 3 as my answer. Now, what if I have 7 take away negative 4? Well, that means I've got 7 positives. Pull these out real fast. It's 4, 5, 6, 7. It says I need to take away 4 negatives, but I don't have 4 negatives to take away. Well, there is one number that I can add into a problem that never changes its value that might provide me with some negatives, and that's a 0 pair. So if I were to add a 0 pair to the problem, it didn't change its value any, but it does add a negative into the problem. So what if I added that 4 times? I added 4 0 pairs. Well, it still has a value of 7, but it tells me that I have 4 negatives I can now take away. So if I took these 4 negatives away and threw them away, as the problem says, it gives me a value of 11. Okay, so when you look at what we did right there, was we built out 7 at the very beginning. We pulled 7 positives out. And then I added into the problem some 0 pairs. And then the 4 that we ended up with, it changed to an additional 4 positives. So we end up with 11 total altogether. So we have a rule in subtraction that says that we don't do it, that we're going to change it. So we change this subtraction to an addition, and we change this 4 to its opposite, and we ended up getting the same answer. And that's what we're going to do when we have subtraction, is we're not going to do it. We're going to change subtraction to addition, and the next number to its opposite, and then fall back on our addition rules. Okay, so in this problem right here, I've got a 9 take away negative 4. So we kept the 9 the same. We changed the subtraction to addition, the negative 4 to a positive 4, and we were able to do the problem. Okay, so let's see if we can do a couple just to kind of finish up here. Okay, so in this first one here, we have to think about our rules. And we have to think about 2 things. Our first question is, what type of a problem is it? Is it an addition problem or a subtraction problem? In this one right here, it's an addition problem. So we have a set of rules that we use. If it is addition, if our signs are alike, we add our numbers. But if our signs are different, like we have here, we're going to subtract our numbers. So 45 take away 36 is going to give us a positive 9. And it's positive because the 45 has more. So if you remember back to the pictures that we were doing, this says I got 45 positives. This has got 36 negatives. So these 36 negatives will zap out 36 of these positives. And who do I have more of? I've got more positives left. Now, if we have a subtraction problem, we're going to leave this first number alone. We're going to change this subtraction to addition, and we're going to change this negative to its opposite. We always have to do a double change there. And then we go back to our addition rules. So in this particular one, I've got a negative 52 and a positive 16. So my signs are different, so I'm going to subtract my numbers. So we take 52, and I like doing this one in 2 parts. I'm going to do 52 take away 10, which is going to give me a 42. And then I'll take away 6 more to give me 36. Now, because the 52 has got more, it's going to be a negative 36. Now, if we have a string of numbers here, what I want you to focus on are all the minuses. Okay, so here's a minus right here. So this front one is a negative, so we leave it alone. We don't mess with it, but this one is a minus. So I'm going to change this minus to a plus, and the 12 is going to change to a positive. Then I'm going to change this minus to a plus, and the 8 is going to turn into a negative. Then I'm going to change this minus into a plus, and this negative 14 will turn into a positive 14. So what we end up with is negative 7 plus 12 plus negative 8 plus 14. Now, what I'd like for you to do once we have everything into an addition problem is you're going to combine things that are alike. So this negative 7 and this negative 8, I'm going to add those together. And I'm going to end up with a negative 15. And then I'm going to take my 12 and my 14 and put those together because they're both positive. We end up with a positive 26. So we now look at our rules. Our signs are different, negative 15 and positive 26. They're different, so I'm going to subtract my numbers. So I take the bigger looking one, 26, I subtract 15 from it, and I end up with 11 as my answer. Okay, and it's going to be a positive 11 because the 26 has more. Okay, so last problem here. This plus, I leave it alone because I'm good with that. But this minus, I'm going to change it, and the 8's going to change to a negative. This minus here, I'm going to change it to a plus, and the 13, I'm going to change to a positive. So we end up with 18 plus 4 plus negative 8 plus positive 13. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all my positives together, and then all my negatives together, and then do one subtraction problem. So we end up with 18 plus 4, which gives us 22, plus the 13 that we have here, which is going to give me 35. And I have plus negative 8. So 35 plus negative 8, my signs are different, so I now subtract, and I end up with 27 as my answer. So to review, if the problem is an addition problem, we have two rules. If the signs are alike, you add the numbers together and keep the sign. If our signs are different, we're going to subtract the numbers and take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. If it's a subtraction problem, we're not going to do it. We're going to change it. We're going to change the subtraction to addition and the next number to its opposite, and then go back to our add rules. Signs alike add, signs different subtract. Until next time.